So good afternoon and good morning to anyone listening from Europe. Thank you very much for joining us today for this highly requested webinar on investing in Vietnam. I'm Sophie Mermaz, CCIFV Hanoi Branch Director, your host for this session. I'm here with our Managing Director, Etienne. We are pleased and honored to welcome today's speakers. We have Mr. Etienne Laumonier from Auditing Partners. We have Mr. Truong Nhat and Nicolas Blandeau from Constantin, specialists in Audits, Tax and Advisory Services. So at any time during this meeting, you're welcome to interact by dropping some questions in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to include your comments towards the end of the workshop. After the session, you will be able to connect directly with the speakers. We will send you the emails to get in touch directly with them. So swiftly moving on to the agenda, this webinar will allow you to gain a better understanding of Vietnam's business environment. As your panelists will present their outlook on Vietnam's opportunities and share the recent legal developments. Then Constantin will review how to structure your investment. What are your tax obligations with a practical focus on foreign companies doing business in Vietnam. But without further ado, we'll start this meeting with a brief introduction of the French Chamber by Adam.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, everyone, for joining the French Chamber today. In a very special context, we do have competition today because, as you may know, today is one of the days of the visit of the Vietnamese Prime Minister to France. As I am speaking to you, it's something like 9, right? 9 a.m. in France, and as I am speaking to you, a ceremony of signatures of MOUs between French and Vietnamese companies is taking place in Paris with the MEDEF. On this occasion, our chairman Thibaut Giroux is attending this meeting. It's a very high-level meeting with the Vietnamese delegation, French officials, Vietnamese officials, of course, and corporates. At CCIFV, we believe that, of course, Vietnam and France will deepen their strategic partnership, as we call it, on this occasion. It's a great step, another step highlighting important milestones in the bilateral relation. Currently, France is a leading partner of Vietnam in Europe. As such, the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry is a major actor and a relevant partner to deliver updated info and efficient tips with a wide range of business services to answer your needs. So we aim at providing networking, and we aim at favorizing the exchange of information. We have an extensive worldwide network all over the world, in France, in Vietnam. We are a platform to increase your company's exposure throughout our business community and beyond. So at a glance, you can see we are part of course, the French Chamber network, 125 chambers in 95 countries. We are in super close cooperation with the Eurocham, the European Chamber, here in Vietnam with 1,200 members in the community. We are the official and unique representative of Enterprise Europe Network, the official network of the SMEs, the European SMEs worldwide. And we are also a partner of Team France Export. We work closely with many major stakeholders in Europe and in Vietnam, in the private and the public sector. So in the next slide, I will not be too long and I will not develop too much into details the services we offer. I would just say that CCIFV, the Chamber of Commerce, we are a one-stop shop dedicated to business development in and with Vietnam. Our service range from business consultancy to communication and corporate events is delivering a wide range of opportunities to help and boost your business exposure and your brands here in Vietnam, but also for Vietnamese companies abroad, internationally and in Europe. So commercial support, of course. We have 2 business centers, one in Ho Chi Minh City, where I'm sitting right now, one in Hanoi, where Sophie is sitting right now at the moment. We can support you in recruitment, in training, we can put you in touch with our members, experts, partners, and this is why we are here today to learn from our members, APFL and partners, and Constantin Serval. Thank you very much for joining, and then now I want to listen. I give back the floor to Sophie, and I will listen very carefully what our members would like to share to us.
Thank you, Adam. And yes, our business platform is always ready to support your investment projects in the region. So despite recent challenges with the crisis, Vietnam is still considered more than ever an attractive investment destination, but there are still barriers to doing business, which are best navigated with the help of experts. So without transition, I would like to introduce our experts. We have Etienne Laumonier, you are a partner at Auditing Partners, the international law firm. You're based in Ho Chi Minh City. Your expertise mainly covers competition law and policy, capital market transactions, international trade, legal cooperation, and technical assistance related to economic integration and legal reform. Mr. Hoa, you are a partner for Constantin Vietnam and the director of Constantin Vietnam's office. With over 6 years of experience in the accounting and taxation field, you have assisted numerous companies in various sectors for incorporation, accounting setup, HR requirements, and tax compliance. And Nicolas Blandeau, you are account manager at Constantin Vietnam, based in Ho Chi Minh City since 2019. Over the past 2 years, you have acquired a strong expertise regarding foreign investment, procedures, regulations in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia. Before I leave the floor to Etienne, I would like you to answer, I'm talking to the audience now, I would like you to answer 2 quick questions. It's quiz time now. So just take a minute to let me know if your company is already based in Southeast Asia, or do you intend to invest in the region? Yes, my company is already based in Southeast Asia. Yes, I intend to invest, or no, none of the above. And the second question is for 2022, which Southeast Asian country has the highest GDP growth rate forecast? According to you, is it Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines? Only a few seconds left and we'll have a look at the answers. Okay. 61% already based in Southeast Asia, 32% intend to, and 8% no. Okay. And okay, very good. Vietnam is ahead. Good. Well, let's see. The floor is yours, Etienne.
Thank you, Sophie. So let me start by give you a brief introduction of our firm. I mean, Sophie presented us quite extensively already. Basically, we're a law firm. We are based in Vietnam and in Myanmar. We have offices in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and we are a full practice law firm. And I will not spend too much time on presenting our firm, and I will try to get right away into the details of our presentation. Can we move to the next slide, please? So, as I mentioned, we are in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and Yangon, and we are available to support you in those countries. Next slide. So, here you will find my complete contact details. We will go through a Q&A session during the seminar, at the end of the seminar. If you have additional questions, you may reach me by email or phone at any time. Can we move to the next slide? So just to give you an outline of what we will talk about, the first subject would be to give you an outlook of what is Vietnam today and what are the key opportunities there before we move to the structuring of investment, the law and practice of investing into Vietnam, presenting the latest legal development. So it's quite the right time to discuss those topics, as even for the 63% attendees which are already present in Vietnam, there have been some major legal development for the framework structuring your investment in Vietnam. So everyone has something to learn regarding the development. Can we move to the next slide, please? So just to give you first a small outlook or forward on the situation in Vietnam, the sanitary situation. So the figure you have there, Vietnam has suffered quite a large-scale fourth wave, or in our case would be the first wave actually, of COVID, which is not over. I mean, we still have quite a high number of cases on a daily basis, around 5,000 or 6,000 cases on a daily basis nationwide. But it's reducing quite significantly. Over the past 5 months, at least the south of Vietnam was under a very strict lockdown, which has been recently relaxed. So we see a shift a bit in the policy of the authority, where during the past 2 years, the focus was zero COVID, where nowadays Vietnam has switched its focus to try to live with the virus, and has put in place with an extensive vaccination program, which has allowed to relax some of the major limitations for the different provinces. Nowadays, Vietnam will assess the opening of each locality through three factors: the number of cases, obviously, the vaccination rate, and what is the treatment capacity of the locality. And then there is 4 levels of risk, or four colors, from deep red to green, which indicate what people can do in the different locality. So, for example, Ho Chi Minh City 3 weeks ago was considered a very high-risk province. We have now moved to a medium-risk province, just as Hanoi, even if Hanoi has been quite spared through the fourth wave, with quite a limited number of cases if we compare to the population. So the key, if we can move to the next slide, the key policy of Vietnam has been to try to vaccinate as much people as possible. So today, early November, we reached around 60% of the population having received at least 1 shot of a vaccine, and around 30% of the population having obtained 2 shots or being fully vaccinated. Vietnam has allocated those limited resources of vaccine to the major urban centers, so Hanoi, Da Nang, Ho Chi Minh City, and now is getting the surrounding province of those major cities with greater access to vaccine. So we see that the neighboring province of Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang, Binh Duong, Dong Nai are still registering quite a number of cases, but the vaccination is going quite well. So hopefully Vietnam will be able to reopen soon. Can we move to the next slide, please? So let me give you an overview of what opportunities are available in Vietnam and what are the key sectors for investment. So can we move to the next slide? So to start with, let's have a look at the key indicators. So if we have a look, you have a representation of the GDP growth over the past 20 years. You see that the average was around 6 to 7% over the past 20 years. There is a significant drop by the end of 2021. It's mainly connected to drop on the third quarter of 2021, and actually the figure for 2021 is still positive. So Vietnam has actually achieved to continue to grow despite COVID, and we expect that the growth rate for 2021 will be around 3.5 to 4%, despite the fact that Vietnam anticipated initially a 6% growth rate. So despite the situation, Vietnam is still growing. The key engine for growth remain the industrial sector. So can we move to the next slide? So we get the answer to the poll question asked by Sophie earlier. If we look at the ADB forecast for GDP growth for the next year, we see that Vietnam will be one of the top achievers with 6.5% growth rate for 2022, and has managed to be among the best achiever in 2021, 2020, and 2019. So Vietnam one of has made remarkable achievements compared to its peer, despite difficult context. So can we move to the next slide? And one of the key engine for the growth for the Vietnam growth was the foreign direct investment, which have actually kept growing despite the economic lockdown. If we look on a year-to-year basis, 2020 was actually quite a good year, and it seems that in 2021, despite quite severe measures to curtail COVID, 2021 will be even a better year than 2020. We expect to have maybe 2% more foreign direct investment. So the destination of foreign direct investment in the country are primarily in the manufacturing and the processing sectors, then in the energy. If we look at where the investments are coming from, the first investor in Vietnam is actually Singapore. So I guess it's something that we will touch upon with the Constantin team. It's quite, Singapore is a hub for foreign investors to invest throughout Southeast Asia. So many investors choose Singapore and Hong Kong as the first destination before investing into other countries in the region. So can we move to the next slide? So one of the key advantages of investing into Vietnam is that the country is at the center of a web of free trade agreement and regional trade agreements. So this year, for example, we have EVFTA coming into force, so the Europe-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, which have allowed greater market access for Vietnam to Europe with quite a reduction of tariffs. in exchange maybe for greater access to the Vietnamese market or European industry. So EVFTA is one sort of agreement, but Vietnam managed to secure agreements, free trade agreements, preferential agreements with a vast majority of the country. So you can see all the red on the map is the country which have a preferential agreement with Vietnam. So the lacking one is the US. We will see what happens with future development, but I'm sure they will close the gap with the US shortly. Can we move to the next slide? So on Vietnam has actually posted for one of the first time a trade deficit due to the lockdown and the pandemic. But since the reopening of the country, actually it has managed to catch up. And I think today there is a very small trade surplus in Vietnam for October. So if we look at the main destination for export, the first one is the US, where Vietnam exports around 62 billion US dollars of merchandise per year, and followed by China. China is 32 billion, more or less, and the EU is only the third destination for Vietnamese export. In terms of import, China is the biggest supplier for Vietnam, followed by South Korea, and then the ASEAN countries. So you could imagine that South Korea itself is one of the key importers. We have seen that as an anecdote, it is said that a company like Samsung represents around 20% of Vietnam export to Japan itself. So it's quite very big. So can we move to the next slide, please? So on this slide, I try to give you basically the key determinants for investing into Vietnam. So why investing into Vietnam? Because we find quite high population. The growth rate is on average 7% per year. The GDP per capita is was around 2,700 US per year, and it's growing every year. You have access to quite a large and dynamic workforce, which is competitive in terms of cost, and you will get access to a country which is open for foreign investment, which is integrated in the region and in the world, and which have vibrant economy and quite a supportive ecosystem for investing. So can we move to the next slide, please? So I just wanted to show you this slide. For me, it's quite very interesting. The takeout from this slide is to avoid a misrepresentation. Many people have an idea that Vietnam is actually exporting low added value products, so textile, garments, shoes. I mean, it's true that there is a number of footwear and garments which are produced and exported by Vietnam, or which are processed in Vietnam. But nowadays, the key exports for Vietnam are more phones, spare parts for machineries, computers. So they are actually one of the country which have climbed up on the value-added chain and which is exporting nowadays quite high-value products. So Vietnam is no longer an export processing zone where you will produce a cheap product. There is quite many opportunities for value-added product being produced and exported from Vietnam. Can we move to the next slide, please? So after this macroeconomic presentation, I like to focus on some key sectors, let's say the hot sectors in which we have seen major investment over the past few years. So and we could discuss a number of them, but we have chosen to focus on three. So tech sectors, renewable energy projects, and I wanted to discuss a bit about the Vietnamese stock market. If we look at the three most favored sectors for, let's say, private equity investment in 2019-2020 was fintech, education, healthcare, and renewable energy. So can we move to the next slide, please? So here you will see a mapping which has been done on all the key fintechs which are currently operating in Vietnam. So for those which are Vietnam-based, I'm sure you know some of them, or you're even using some of them on a daily basis. We do have some unicorns in Vietnam. The most famous one being Zalo. So the entire Zalo ecosystem. So from the chat application to the payment application, they managed to develop quite a comprehensive ecosystem, which is valued very high today. So it was the first unicorn for Vietnam, and I'm sure there are many others which will come. So the fintech actually has been earmarked by the authority for development. So they are nowadays, with the new regulation which have been passed, easier investment requirement for startups. So we will see later that when you invest in a startup, you may be able to bypass some of the key regulatory approvals that are required for other sectors. And the State Bank of Vietnam has been very pushy to develop a sandbox for all fintechs that will be supporting the payment intermediation system in Vietnam. So there is significant opportunities there to develop a product or to take part to the development of those sectors. Can we move to the next slide, please? So for renewable and energy project, so again, you have for renewable energy, you have two main routes which need to be distinguished. On the one part, the public-private partnership route, which is usually for larger projects, which have been, let's say, didn't yield the promises that people saw there. PPP were very fashionable a few years back, but I guess investors are coming back from those type of investment where you have to partner with one provincial or state authority. It's a long-term project. The setting up is quite painful, but the advantage is that you will get some type of governmental support and guarantees for implementation of your project. What we see more today is the private investment route. So where the investor is not partnering with a public authority, but is developing an independent project, and then try to develop into independently from the state. And we have seen some major investment in renewable, so from wind power, solar power, which have attracted so many investors that there is actually today some issues. If you are interested in those sectors, there may be 3 items that you need to take into account. And we have a limited time, so I will not explain too much. You can go through those items in the Q&A. Please have a look at the Power Development Plan number 8, which has been passed a few weeks back. So 3 weeks ago, we had the planning for the power development of the entire country, which has been made available to the public. If you want to develop a project, make sure that your project is compliant with that plan. Then have a look at the tariff available. So there is a bit of uncertainty for a number of renewable energy, because Vietnam has put in place a feed-in tariff, quite interesting feed-in tariff, subsidized tariff, which end up 31st of October this year, so 3-4 days ago. So there have been a rush for a number of the projects to get the commercial operation before the cutoff date, to benefit from that feed-in tariff. And we anticipate that the next phase will be kind of the bidding process with the off-taker to establish the price. So there will be a bit of uncertainty regarding the tariff applicable. Then, so to have a look at that, we also need to take into account what the standardized PPA which have been put in place. If you are intending to sell energy to EVN, or look at what are future development which is highly anticipated by investors, where you will be able to conclude directly a PPA with one developer or one consumer. Usually, think in the industrial park, for example, you will be able to cater for the need of specifically that industrial park without going through the national grid, and you would actually be able to set up your own price. So,
Etienne, sorry to interrupt. Can you just make sure you speak near your microphone so that we can hear correctly everything? Thank you.
Okay, let me try to arrange something. Can you hear me better now?
Oh, that's much better.
Okay. So can we move to the next slide, please? So here are basically the key consideration that you have to take into account when you want to invest into renewable energy. I mean, we touch upon a number of them. Bear in mind that one of the big difference between, let's say, a European country and Vietnam is also regarding a land use right. So you cannot be the owner of the land. You will need to negotiate with the state to be a land user for a specific purpose. The good thing is that energy is open for investors. So there is actually no foreign ownership limits provided you actually just operate in that specific sectors, but you still need a number of approval for purchasing, let's say, an entity which is operating a power project. We will be able to discuss with Etienne later on. Can we move to the next slide? So just a few words on the PPP and infrastructure project. So as I told you, source projects have been very fashionable in the past, but actually only a few have actually reached financial closing and commercial operation. So to try to tackle that issue, Vietnam recently has completely revamped its PPP regulation and has tried to address a number of concerns that investors had in developing such projects. Can we move to the next slide? So the way Vietnam has approached sees a reboot as first limited the number of sectors open to PPP. So before you could do PPPs in every possible sectors of the economy. Nowadays it's more limited to power, water, IT infrastructures, and some other limited sectors. The second thing is the government of Vietnam is working on a standardized contract, which would allow the investors to work faster to implement a project. And the drawback is that nowadays investors are required to provide more securities when they are bidding for a project with a public authority and are likely to receive actually less guarantee from the state. We have seen that the very first PPP, the state was giving vast or very broad guarantee regarding the offtake, regarding the access to foreign currency, regarding repatriation of profit. And many investors have expected that source first level of guarantee would be extended to all other projects. It has not been the case, and that has led to actually significant delays, at least for foreign invested PPPs. When I say that the source type of investment have actually not succeeded, it's not exactly true. That it did not succeed with foreign investors, which had very high expectation. But actually, you see a number of PPPs implemented by local investors, which are very successful. So that's a way to also get access to infrastructure investment, is partnering with a Vietnamese entity which have a portfolio of infrastructure available in the PPP form. It's usually quite a good route for investment. Can we move to the next slide, please? I'm sure we can continue. Just a few words on the Vietnamese stock market. I mean, you have the progression of the index on the slide. You've seen that there had been a drop on the right-hand side of 2021. There had been a drop at the beginning of the pandemic. But the Vietnam index has actually catch up very fast, and is like the CAC 40 in France, is reaching one of its highest numbers. So it has increased by 26–27% in the beginning of the year. So it's quite remarkable. The question is the stock market a good entry or a good exit for investors? I would tend to think it's maybe easier to consider an IPO in Vietnam as an exit than investing directly into Vietnamese company listed, it's a bit difficult because there are still foreign ownership limitations applicable for listed companies which are operating in some conditional sectors. So there is one conditional sector in the entire list of authorized business of those entities. There will be limitation, and you could not take control over it. And then the market remained a bit shallow. So there is market power for some major funds, for example, which are able to make the market move in one direction or the other when they are staying stuck on the market. Then it's not the most transparent market. So access to information, if you're not a Vietnamese speaker, is quite difficult. Can we move to the next slide, please? We see that there have been a number of private equity deals in Vietnam over the past years. I mean, we have a number of quite high-profile transactions which took place. Sabeco transaction with Thai investors was over 5 billion. We had the sale of Big C to another Thai investors, which was over 1 billion. So the most recent one, the largest one, was FE Credit, one of consumer finance transaction, which was sold to Sumitomo by a Vietnamese bank. So we have quite a number of transactions even in the past years. So can we move to the next slide, please? So let me brief you regarding the latest legal development. I will focus mostly on the law on investment and the law on enterprise. So we can move to the next slide. So again, when you invest in Vietnam, there are different types of funds. You can invest directly, you can enter into joint ventures. In some sectors, you still find a cooperation contract, which is just a contractual sector, unincorporated joint ventures. So the PPP that we discussed, or you can purchase shares in an existing entity. Can we move to the next slide? So what for those which are not familiar with Vietnam, when you invest into the country, you have to change your software. In Vietnam, compared to other jurisdictions, you don't invest by establishing a company and then implement a project. Vietnam is the other way around. The first thing you have to do is actually have your investment project validated by the authority. And once you get this validation in the form of an investment registration certificate, you're then allowed to establish a company. So again, the first thing you have to do to invest into Vietnam is identify one project that you want to conduct, make sure that this project is actually open to foreign investors, and once you get the validation from the local authority, you will be able to actually establish a company to conduct that project. So what has a change in 2020 is, before 2020, we had only a positive list of sectors which were open to foreign investors. And if your intended project didn't match one of those sectors, you were not authorized to invest. Now we have a complete change. We have a negative list of sectors which are not open to foreign investors or which are conditional to foreign investors. So we could go through the extensive list. To give you an idea, there is 26 sectors which are not open to foreign investors and around 60 sectors which are conditional, where you need to get a specific license, where you need to get some volume of investment available. So I'm sure we can discuss those one in the Q&A. But so the good thing is now everything which is not in the list is actually open for the investors, for foreign investors. Can we move to the next slide? So I give you some type of good news, but you need to be careful. The authority has still quite a wide range of maneuver to approve your project. So if you buy more than 50% of the share of a Vietnamese company, you will need to get a specific approval. If the authority considers that there is some national defense or security interest involved in your investment, there would be specific control. If there is land involved, there could be specific control. So we thought that it was a great opening, but there are still some room for the authority to actually control what type of investment are authorized into Vietnam. Can we move to the next slide? That's also to give you a small warning. Be mindful about nominees agreement. The new law on investment has opened the possibility for the local authority to challenge any type of nominee structure, which are usually used to circumambulate limitation for foreign investors. As the time goes fast, I will just flip you through the next few slides on enterprise. So regarding the governance of a Vietnamese entity, what you have to keep in mind is, first of all, look at the charter. In Vietnam, the decision-making process, unless it's otherwise provided in the charter, is not simple majority of 50%, is 65%. So it's one of the key elements that you have to take into consideration. Then, if we can move to the next slide, we could get into the details of the key development of the new law of enterprise. For those which are familiar with the European system, we are moving closer to efficient corporate governance with the protection for minority shareholders and tighter control on the related party transaction. So, next slide, please. So here, that in a way of a transition, you will see that you have the whole process to establish an entity. So it can take up, on paper, it could take only 3-4 weeks. Expect it to be a bit longer. And so once you have your project validated, your company established, please reach Truong and Nicolas. They will be able to assist you for your daily operation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Etienne, for your insightful presentation and recent legal developments. Before I leave the floor to Constantin, I would like to ask the audience another 2 questions. So it's quiz time again. What is the minimum wage in Ho Chi Minh City, according to you? Is it around 350 USD or 190 USD? And second question, what is the standard corporate income tax? Is it 17% or 20%? 1 minute to answer. And then we will leave the floor to Constantin for their presentation. Okay, let's see who's right. Oh, wow, okay. Well, okay, let's listen to you, Nhat and Nicolas, and we'll ask questions to Etienne later. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you, Etienne and Adam also. So as I saw in the poll, we'll be discussing all this subject now. So I'm Nicolas, manager at Constantin, Vietnam. I'm here with Mr. Truong, who's a partner of the firm and the director of the Vietnam office. So for Constantin is an accounting and audit firm, a French one. We've been established in Asia for more than 30 years right now. We have 8 offices in 8 countries in the region. So we can provide like services across all Asia Pacific to our clients. We also have a good expertise, of course, in cross-border transaction. So for the services, maybe we can switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the main services that we provide are audit and accounting, tax consulting, and we also take care of the tax returns for our client. We can handle the payroll management also. We also work like, we're glad to work with the CCIFV on the company setup. We provide it to the foreign investors and to the foreigners also contacting the CCIFV. And depending on the jurisdiction, we can also provide some corporate secretarial services. And so now we can begin with the, oh, sorry. So yeah, here is how contact. I believe they will also be shown at the end of the webinar. So we will talk about like briefly about a question we receive quite often, which is, should I structure my investment in Vietnam through holding in Hong Kong or Singapore? We can switch maybe directly. Yes, thank you. So for many people, they're wondering if it's a good idea to do so. Like, there is no right answer to this question, but there are a lot of advantages to set up your investments through Hong Kong or Singapore. I saw in the poll at the beginning that maybe half of the people are already set up in Asia. I believe most of you have already a company in Hong Kong or Singapore. So as it stands right now, Hong Kong and Singapore are really open market economy, which might not be completely the case for Vietnam yet. So in those 2 countries, it's really easy to open a company. You have many tax incentives. You have limited restriction, whether it's on investment structure or on foreign exchange control. There are 2 of the main hubs, not only in Asia, but over the world. Like in the Doing Business report issued by the World Bank every year, Hong Kong and Singapore are always in the top 5. And regarding Vietnam, it's no exception. Like, Singapore is the main investor in Vietnam in 2021. So these are the figures for 2021 until September. Singapore injected like more than $6 billion USD in Vietnam since the beginning of the year. Meanwhile, Hong Kong invested a bit less than $2 billion USD, which make it the 5th investor in Vietnam. So Hong Kong and Singapore like give you a real advantage when you invest in Vietnam, because it will ease all the paperwork process. Like, the Vietnamese authorities are really used to work with the paperwork issued from Hong Kong authorities or Singaporean authorities. So it makes everything smoother. And yeah, you probably know, or you probably heard that Vietnam is still very much a paperwork country, I could say. So this is about those 2 countries, but now we maybe want to talk about the tax. So if we can switch to the next slide, please. Okay, so now we will talk about the reduced withholding tax rate. So what is a withholding tax? It means that the payer of the income will withhold the tax amount, and the payee, the person receiving the income, will only receive the net amount. So there will be no tax liability on the payee. So you have an example on the right when it in regards to dividends. For dividends, when you remit your dividends from Vietnam, whether it's to Hong Kong or Singapore, if you have a holding there that own 100% of your Vietnam subsidiary, you won't have a withholding tax. And from Hong Kong and Singapore, whether it's in France or other countries, like, you won't have a withholding tax either. It's not the same for interest and royalties income. You will have reduced withholding tax rate when you remit your income from Vietnam to Hong Kong or Singapore. As you can see, we took the example of France. It can also be interesting to invest directly through France or without a holding in Hong Kong or in Singapore. You will enjoy low rates, close to 0 for dividends and interest income. This depends mainly on the double tax treaty. So depending on where you are, where is the foreign capital coming, you want to structure your investment differently, maybe to avoid double taxation. Hong Kong and Singapore have a lot of double tax treaty with other countries, with Vietnam and France also. But also, I think Singapore has close to 100 DTAs and Hong Kong maybe more than 50, close to 60 DTAs. So we can maybe switch to the next slide. Yes, so perfect. So here you can see, depending where your foreign capital is coming, it will be easier to settle everything if you plan to invest in Asia, in Hong Kong or Singapore, because it will offer you more flexibility instead of if you invest directly in Vietnam, like from different countries. In Hong Kong or Singapore, you have not much paperwork and you need no registration to allocate your share capital or to increase your capital. You don't have that, which might be the case in Vietnam. So it can be very useful for you to invest through Hong Kong or Singapore. And also, like, it's a very broad subject, so we cannot discuss it all today, but we will be happy to answer your question whether today or after the webinar through email or through a call. So feel free to discuss with us after. Maybe we can switch to the next. Perfect, thank you. So now we will talk about the business operation, the day-to-day operation, how to manage your company in Vietnam. First, we will talk about accounting and auditing, which are our main field of expertise. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the international accounting standards. You may know about the International Financial Reporting Standard, the IFRS. Sorry. So they're used to, they have been used to produce the Vietnamese accounting standards. So today you have 26 accounting standards in Vietnam, which are specific to Vietnam. And you can find differences with the international standards. So you have like maybe the three most important from the outside, which is like the accounting records must be maintained in Vietnamese language. The accounting currency must be Vietnamese dong. And you also have to comply with a Vietnamese chart of account, which is a specific one. For if we go deeper into the accounting standards, you also have, for example, difference between the IFRS 16 about the lease. In Vietnam, you cannot capitalize your lease liability. You cannot also capitalize your renovation expenses. Another one could be that you cannot, there is no concept of deferred income in Vietnam. You always need an invoice to recognize your revenue. And talking about invoice, maybe I will finish on the accounting, but most of our clients, they would use two reports. One report's compliant with the Vietnamese accounting standard, and one report that could be compliant with the international standards and make it easier for the consolidation at the end of the year. So if you're booked with many subsidiaries, whether it's in Asia or around the world, you may want to have two accounting reports each year. For the invoicing, you also have requirements. So saying your invoice need to be in Vietnamese, you can have a second language. You also have to register your template with the tax authorities. It's like a specific process. And you also need, that makes sense, but an invoice number. And also another set of details, which are the addresses of the buyer and the seller, the tax codes. You want to be careful with your invoices, because if they're not compliant with all the requirements, they will not be deductible, which is whether it's for VAT purpose, value-added tax purpose, or for corporate income tax purpose, CIT. So you want to be careful. Like, for example, in Vietnam, receipts are not acceptable as invoices. So if you want to be sure your invoice is like compliant, you need to ask your accountant. There's not a lot of way around this topic. Like, that's what you want to do. And finally, for the audits, so this is, I would say, one of the three differences that exist between a locally owned company in Vietnam with no foreign investment and a foreign invested company. Etienne previously mentioned two of those differences, which are the investment registration process with the investment registration certificate. Second is the number of business lines that are restricted for foreign investors. And third is the mandatory audit for companies with foreign invested capital. Whether it's 1% or 100%, it doesn't matter. If you have foreign capital in your company, you will need to audit your annual statements. Maybe you can switch to the next slide. Thank you. So for the corporate taxation, a Vietnamese entity, which is established under the Vietnamese law, no matter it's a local or foreign company, will have to pay the standard corporate income tax of 20%, whether the income is from service delivered abroad or in Vietnam. All the income received in Vietnam will be subject to corporate taxation mainly. All the income received by the Vietnamese entity. For the tax loss, you can carry forward for a maximum of 5 years your tax loss. And regarding the expenses deductibility, you want to be sure to have appropriate documentation. So that's what I was mentioning with the invoicing, notably, like that's very important that you keep all your records, all your papers, your invoice. And also, of course, it needs to be incurred for business purpose. Regarding the different type of income, so for dividends, we've been talking about it a bit when I was mentioning Hong Kong and Singapore, but when you remit your dividends to a corporate shareholder, you won't have withholding tax. And when it's about individual shareholder, you will have a 5% withholding tax. For the other type of income, so capital gains when you sell some shares in another company, or in financial interest, like when you have an intra-group loan with one of your subsidiary, and finally like a royalties income when you have a licensing agreement. All this income received in Vietnam will be subject to the standard CIT rate of 20%. Maybe we can switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for the value-added tax, any organization or individual engaged in the production or the exchange of taxable goods and services must be registered for the VAT. The declaration, the period of declaration depends on your turnover. For the first year, it can be quarterly. After that, if your turnover, your yearly turnover is above 2,200,000, you will have to declare your VAT return on every month. Regarding the rates, so all the exports are subject to a reduced and preferential rate of 0%. Meanwhile, essential goods and services, which can be clean water, pharmaceutical, they're subject to a 5% rate, a preferential rate of 5%. For the rest, it's 10%, which is the standard rate in Vietnam. For your VAT return, you need, once again, all your invoice, contracts, also your custom declaration, if you do some exportation, and a proof of payment by bank transfer for each payment, which is above $800 USD. You should know that for the VAT refund, in case you have more VAT input than VAT output, it's very rare in Vietnam. It's almost only allowed for companies that export goods. And to be able to claim your VAT refund, you need to reach the threshold of 13,000 US dollars. So most of the time, people will keep this VAT input and they can offset it with the VAT output for as long as they want. There's no time limit on this. So maybe we can switch to the next slide. Thank you. For the tax incentives, when it's about foreign investment project, so they are only allowed in two, if you meet one of those two criteria, The first one being like if your investment project is located in a specific zone, so it can be a disadvantaged zone, economically disadvantaged zone of Vietnam, or industrial zone like high-tech processing zone, this type of industrial zone which are located most of the time close to big city, close to highways, to maritime port or airport. So whether it's close to Hanoi, in Hanoi, I think one of the main region would be Haiphong maybe. And in the south, there are a lot of industrial zone hosting high-tech project, investment project. And the other criteria that you would need to meet, that you could meet like if you want to benefit from tax incentives, is to invest in certain sectors. So those sectors can be education, high-tech, microfinancing, renewable energies, as Etienne was talking earlier also. And so whether your investment project is located in a specific zone or whether you invest in a specific business line, you may enjoy some preferential CIT rates, so corporate income tax rate, like reduced tax rate. You may be exempt from tax on some goods, like import tax. You also have a reduction of your land levy and land rents, and from an accounting point of view, you could benefit from an accelerated depreciation also. So for this tax incentive, you want to make sure that you ask for it at the moment, like when you complete your investment application. So when you do the investment registration process, because you won't be able to ask it after. So you want to make sure that you do it at the right time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we're talking about a specific and tricky subject, kind of. So the foreign contractor tax is a mechanism to withhold the tax applied to a payment made by a Vietnamese party to a foreign entity that have no legal presence in Vietnam for all the service rendered in Vietnam. So you have a scheme down on the slide, might make it more easier for you to understand. So we're talking about when a company located outside of Vietnam with no legal entity in Vietnam provide a service in Vietnam to a Vietnamese party or client. So like the entity located outside of Vietnam and providing the service in Vietnam will be liable for what is called the foreign contractor tax. So the foreign contractor tax is composed of corporate income tax and value-added tax components. I won't go much into details, but the tax rate depends on which service you're providing in Vietnam. And in the end, like the Vietnamese party, so the person receiving the service in Vietnam, would withhold the tax amount and pay directly to the Vietnamese tax authorities, while the foreign contractor, the one providing the service in Vietnam, would only receive the net income and like that would not have any tax liability in Vietnam anymore. So you want to be careful when you companies establish in Vietnam and you're dealing with partner outside of Vietnam. Yeah, so I will hand over the presentation to Mr. Hoa. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicolas. Hello, everyone. I'm Hoa from Constantin, and I will continue the rest of today's webinar. Next part will be about the daily operation, the maintenance of the activity in Vietnam. So first, after you incorporate the company in Vietnam, the first thing you will do is opening the bank account. A foreign entity will need at least 2 bank accounts to operate in Vietnam. First, the investment account, and secondly, the daily transaction account. About the investment account, as indicated by its name, the investment account is used for 2 purposes only. First, to receive the investment and the capital. Secondly, is to remit the profits of the company back to the investor. And after you inject the capital to the investment account, you can transfer it to the business account, the daily transaction account for business purpose. And for the daily transaction account, this account used for all the activity of the business. For the currency of the account, basically you can open the bank account at own currency. For the investment account, when you invest in Vietnam and when you apply with the investment department, you will need to indicate the way you invest in Vietnam and the amount equivalent to which currency as well. And on the investment certificate, it will show the investment in amount in Vietnam dong and amount in foreign currency. So for the investment account, you can only open the account in the foreign currency appear on the investment certificate. Besides two accounts, we usually recommend our client to open one bank account at a local bank. Why? Because for a local bank, they usually have the connection with the tax department and social insurance department. So in this case, the process for the payment will be easier and easier to track as well. Next, please. Okay, so next is about the foreign currency restriction in Vietnam. For this, the principle is that in Vietnam, most of the transactions must be in Vietnam dong. Only in some exceptional case that you can process with foreign currency, like you make the payment to overseas supplier, receive the payment from overseas client, or you pay the salary for the foreign worker or for the staff. And you are maybe you are wondering how it works in Vietnam. Who gonna restrict you from process in foreign currency? The answer is your bank partner. Let's say one day you accidentally you convert the USD to VND, and then you want to convert it back. It's impossible. Your bank won't process the transaction to convert back the VND to USD, except that you have good relationship with them, and then you write a letter to explain the situation and cancel the transaction. Otherwise, there is no way you can convert the VND to foreign currency. Every time you process with the foreign currency, you will need to submit the document to your bank to clarify the reason for that. Okay, next please. Here you can see the yearly obligation schedule of general entity in Vietnam. On the left side, you can see the schedule of the whole year. Every quarter, you will need to declare tax, report on the trend of employment, trend of the employee every half year on May and November. The financial year in Vietnam begin by 1st of January and end of December. If you want to apply a flexible financial year, you will need to ask for the approval from the Ministry of Finance. And by March of the subsequent year, you will need to submit the financial statement of that. Submit the financial statement, finalize on the tax of the year. On the right side, you will see the government body that entity will usually liaise with in Vietnam. First is the Ministry of Finance. They control and manage the national budget, tax, and also define the rule of corporate accounting. So anytime there is new update about the accounting rule in Vietnam, it will be done by the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Labor is the one who is responsible for control the labor force in Vietnam. For example, for expat and foreign worker in Vietnam, you will need to apply for the work permit with the Ministry of Labor. The Ministry of Planning and Investment, they control the investment in Vietnam. At the first step, when you invest in Vietnam, you need to ask for the approval of the investment from this ministry. And finally, the Department of Taxation. This department is an agency under the Ministry of Finance, but it is one of the most important departments in Vietnam, and you will liaise with this department a lot during your business in Vietnam. Next part is about the labor regulation in Vietnam, about the employment, the personal income tax, and social contribution in Vietnam. Next, please. So about the employment in Vietnam, for the employment in Vietnam, the contract must be in Vietnamese, or it can be bio-language, but one language must be Vietnamese. And for the salary, as indicated before about the foreign currency restriction in Vietnam, on the salary in Vietnam deal with local employee must be VND. It's said that the employment contract is for the spark, only the spark can receive the salary and deal the salary in foreign currency. Below, you can see the general regulation in Vietnam about the labor regulation. First, about the minimum wage of Ho Chi Minh City. Currently, the minimum wage is approximately around USD 190. But this is paper only. In reality, if you want to fire the employee in Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City, you will need to pay at least around 350 or 400 at the moment. And for the working hour in Vietnam, usually the working hour is 8 hours per day and 48 hours per week. 48 hours per week. And for overtime, when the employee working overtime, we need to pay extra for the overtime. It is 150% for the standard working hour, 200% in the weekend, and 400% on the public holiday. The statutory paid leave in Vietnam is 12 days per working year. And in Vietnam, we have 11 public holidays every year. The last about the sick leave and the medical expense. This is not the obligation of the employer. For the sick leave and the medical expense, usually it can be covered by the social insurance department. So when we contribute for the social insurance every month, we can have this benefit to cover the sick leave and cover the medical expense. Next, please. Okay, next is quite interesting part for the expat in Vietnam, and of course for the Vietnamese as well, about the personal income tax. Before we go to the personal income tax rate, we need to define our tax status in Vietnam, whether we are tax resident in Vietnam or we are non-tax resident. The most general way to define the tax resident is about our stay in Vietnam. If we stay in Vietnam for more than 183 days over a year, then we are resident in Vietnam. Or we have a rental contract for over 183 days, or we have a permanent resident address in Vietnam.
Oh, it seems that we have a problem with Hoa's mic.
I think Hoa and Nicolas are back. Hoa and Nicolas, if you can hear us, maybe you can get back to your slide.
Is it better now? Was it on our side?
All good.
Okay, sorry. Did I miss anything, or where should I start
30 seconds.
Okay. Okay. So I continue with the PIT rate in Vietnam. So if you are tax resident in Vietnam, you will be taxed on progressive rate from 5 to 35%. And if you are non-resident, you will be taxed at a fixed rate of 20%. And let's consider the progressive rate. You will see that for every income above 3,500, you will need to contribute 35% of that income. If we consider it compare between Vietnam and France, for example, and other European countries, I can say that the tax in Vietnam is a little bit higher. However, one good news for the expat working in Vietnam, that's in Vietnam, the government encourages foreigners to spend the money in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, there is some tax scheme that that can help the foreign worker in Vietnam can reduce the personal income tax significantly. For example, instead of paying the whole package in cash, the foreign worker can receive it as other benefits like house rental, school fee for children, or the private health insurance. For these kind of benefit, if it's not paid in cash, then it can be exempt from the personal income tax. Next, please. Here is about the social insurance contribution in Vietnam. In Vietnam, the employer have the obligation to contribute the social insurance for the employee, and the employee as well have to have the obligation to contribute as well. So on the left side, you will see the rate applied for local employee Vietnamese. Every month, the employer will need to withhold around 10% from the employee and contribute around 23%. For the foreigner, until end of this year, the rate applied for the foreigner is around 8.5% from the employer and 1.5% from employee. Starting from beginning of next year, it will apply the same for the employer, for the Vietnamese and the foreigner, 22.5% from the employer and 9.5% from the employee. So if only consider about the rate, this is a huge amount, 30% every month on the salary. However, a good thing is that for this contribution, we will have a maximum for the contribution every month. Currently, the maximum is around 450 USD per month. So which means every month, the maximum the employee need to contribute is around 1/3 of it, 150 USD per month, and the employer can contribute around 300 USD per month at maximum. Next part, please. This is about the immigration for the expat in Vietnam. So for a foreign worker in Vietnam to work in Vietnam legally, they will need to obtain at least 2 documents, the visa, resident card, and on the second side is the work permit. Visa and resident card, they serve at the same purpose. They allow the holder to stay in Vietnam. The visa allow the holder to stay in Vietnam with a longer term, like shorter term, like 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year, 5 years. While for the temporary resident card, it allow the holder to stay in Vietnam up to 2 years and 10 years. Work permit, as indicated by the name, the work permit is a document allow the foreigner to work in Vietnam. In order to apply for the work permit, the foreigner have to satisfy some requirement, at least 18 years old, have at least 3 years of professional experience, and university degree, but bachelor at least. A work permit is valid for a maximum of 2 years. Next. Here is about the legalization process. For this, the legalization process is a process to make a document issued by foreign country, usually in Vietnam. So let's say for this process, you will need to go through at the first step when you invest in Vietnam or when you apply for the work permit, you will need to get your holding company license legalized before it can be utilized in Vietnam. Usually, the process is different, depend on the country, but it usually go through 3 steps. First, notary authenticated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Secondly, translate it to Vietnam and certify translate. Thirdly, go to the Vietnam embassy and legalize it. Next. Okay.
I think it was the last slide of the presentation. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Etienne, Juan, Nicolas, for all the insightful talks, and I'm sure the audience got a good growth on doing business in Vietnam and operations, accounting, taxation, etc. If you have any further questions, please feel free to get in touch directly with our speakers. You can see their email address on our screen, and we just have a few minutes left to take maybe 1 or 2 questions. Before I ask one question to Hoa, I just have a few housekeeping remarks. If you yes, for those people who want to have the slides, don't worry, we will send out the deck. Second thing is that there was a request for the list of sectors not open to foreign investors, and our business manager, Han, will get in touch with you directly. Thank you, Han. Anything else? So a question to Hoa that we have received. Let me just check, and then I will let Adam take over. Yes, a very frequent question that we receive every day, and I'm sure you, Hoa, receive it every day as well. Do you have any updates on easing the restrictions of the business visas to enter Vietnam?
Okay, so for this question, at the moment, due to the effect of the pandemic, Vietnam currently restrict the people enter Vietnam freely like before. In order to enter Vietnam at the moment, you will need to be qualified as an expert, and you need to enter to Vietnam to work. And before you can enter to Vietnam, you need to ask for the approval from the People Committee and also the Immigration Department. Usually it takes 2 months to process for the entry. And about Sophie's question that whether the government is going to lift up the lockdown or lighten the process in next year. So far, if you looking at the paper and on the news, there is no official thing yet. But from my perspective and from my opinion, the government is looking for a way to lighten the entry next year. I don't think it's gonna happen by January, but maybe February, March, or early next year. The government may looking for a way to lighten the process, and people can enter easier. And of course, it's not gonna be like happen like for the whole country, but the government, they may choose some area like Ho Chi Minh City or some province to make a test first, and then if everything going well, they may apply it for the whole country. But of course, this process this will depend really heavily on the status of the COVID in Vietnam. at the moment, everything is going better in Vietnam, but one day if it's going extreme again, then maybe they will need to extend the lockdown.
Sure. Thank you, Hoa. Let's wait and see. Adam, would you like to take over with another question?
Yes, one question for Etienne. Thank you, Sophie. The hot potato question, and with the COP26, we heard Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, Vietnamese Prime Minister, of course, speaking about climate change and how countries must tackle the challenge of using renewable energies. So you developed a little bit. We understand that it is full of opportunities here in Vietnam, but in this context, and as you may know, or the audience might know, there is a strong demand in energy here in Vietnam. And of course, for investors, they need to increase their support and working in cooperation with the Vietnamese authorities to produce more energy. Currently, power purchase agreements, so the PPA in Vietnam, are considered unbankable in Vietnam. So this seems to be preventing further investments in the sector. So Etienne, I'm asking you, do you have any key updates or comments on this major aspect? You are in mute, Etienne. Can you maybe unmute? Yeah.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Maybe one first comment. If you were mentioning renewable, if you look at the power development plan which have been issued in the past few weeks, first of all, coal is not out of the picture. There are still a number of coal-fired projects which are intended to be developed by Vietnam. The question mark for those projects would be how to finance them, because even European bank will not finance. Chinese bank have announced that they will not finance either. So if Vietnam continues to try to develop those coal-fired projects, it will need to be financed by local budget, which politically would be difficult after what the Prime Minister has presented at the COP26. So then we have the entire renewable. So Vietnam has opened a lot of opportunities over the past years for renewable. Maybe it has made a few mistakes. I would be very blunt about that. They have established very attractive feed-in tariffs, where their initial thought was actually to have different tariffs depending on the different zone of the country, with different tariffs in the north, in the center, and the south. Finally, they decided to have one unified feed-in tariff for the entire country. So all the investors, for solar, for example, they choose the provinces where you have the most sun available. So most of the southern province, you have thousands of projects which have developed in the south, where other provinces didn't get any investment. And then EVN is still not able to connect all those projects to the grid. So we have quite a lot of curtailment issue. That's the second point. Then regarding the PPA, indeed, for foreign investors, I remember the first time I presented the Vietnamese PPA for a foreign bank. They told me, okay, it's just the table of content that you send me. The template PPA for EVN is 8 pages, where usually a PPA for a larger project is already 100 pages, 200 pages easily. So it could be very surprising. Nonetheless, the approach which has been working quite well for foreign investors is not necessarily to invest in the project themselves from inception, but then finding a company which have already developed a number of projects and have a portfolio of a project which are already being developed or in operation. And that's the way many foreign investors actually have entered into the Vietnamese market. It's, I would say, rather more cost efficient and easier for stepping in.
That was very, very rich answer. Thank you. Thank you very much, Etienne. We have many questions, but we are a bit running out of time, unfortunately. Maybe Sophie, one or two questions.
I'm just going. Sure. Just one last from me, going from the top. Do you have the guideline and requirements for an investment from the US, Vietnam, equity or debt financing? Can we do pros and cons? That's a question from Nancy. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I can take this one. So first of all, Vietnam works under the 3 pillars of WTO. So it's there will be no discrimination between investors. So either from the US or from another country, supposedly you will get the same treatment. It's maybe not exactly true if you're Chinese. In practice, the Vietnamese authority are still looking a bit upon a Chinese investment. But so an investment from the US would be most welcome. If you invest into equity, so either through greenfield investment, establishing your own company, the first step is obtaining your investment registration certificate based on your project, the description of your project, compared to the authorized or conditional business lines. Debt financing, you have to be careful in Vietnam. Any foreign loans are required to be registered with the State Bank of Vietnam first before they are disbursed. You may find some company which have issued some international bonds, which would be floated on some markets. So there are some opportunity there, but it would be larger companies. And actually, there are only a handful of them which have quoted bonds internationally. So, I mean, Vietnam still welcome both types of investment. You may look at local bonds eventually. There are a number of them which are listed on the stock market.
Noted with thanks. We have a question, maybe rather technical question regarding the services provided by Constantin here in Vietnam. Your corporate, what does this exactly comprise? Management, consultancy activities? Do you provide accounting, tax, corporate legal services in Vietnam? Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
So for the management consulting activity in Vietnam, we provide the service like the name of the activity. We consult about the investment in Vietnam and also about the daily operation of the client in Vietnam as well, and about the part about the accounting tax. And in Vietnam, we will have the company structure that allow us to provide the tax and accounting service as well. We have a subsidiary which will hand over this kind of service.
Well noted. Thank you. We are running out of time now. Maybe last question would be for Etienne. It's a bit, I'd say, complicated question to answer. Maybe which public listed company in Vietnam has or maybe would have the best management team? Which public company listed in Vietnam would benefit the most from fintech and e-commerce? These companies should thus be listed on the stock exchange.
That's an old ball. I mean, first of all, I mean, in Vietnam, on the listed companies, so to answer your question, you have to look at the market structure. We have actually I would say secondary market. It's not exactly the term, but we have a startup market, or the equivalent of the Nasdaq in New York. We have Upcom in Vietnam. So on these specific market, you will find companies which are, let's say, the future unicorns of Vietnam, which are already quite developed because they're able to list. And even if the requirement of the main board is lessened, you could find a number of companies which present a good prospect for the development of new economy, new technologies, and IT. So have a look at Upcom Hanoi.
Good answer. Thank you, Etienne. Sophie, I give you the floor. I think we too much out of time right now, and I would like to myself thank a lot Etienne, Hoa, and Nicolas. But I give you the floor, Sophie, to wrap it up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much to our speakers today to help us have a better understanding of the business environment. Please feel free to contact them directly. They are their email address, and also to contact us at the Chamber. I just wanted to let you know that we have another event coming up next week. It's a business recovery talk with Kantar. COVID-19 impacts on consumer trends and on the retail scene in Vietnam. So that's going to be really, really interesting. Please join us. It's free of charge. We'll see you next week for this event, and more events coming up. Feel free to check out our website, ccifv.org. Thank you so much for joining, and have a good day.